just wanted to quickly talk about the Sportsball issue anyway. I was on a stream with Chris Dangerfield there last week, and I actually forgot to mention it to him because it had been the subject of a discussion in the previous week. Sportsball, for anyone that doesn't move in sort of reactionary or right-wing circles, is a kind of a dismissive term to or charge to make it people who in this day and age still enjoy looking at sports, particularly like soccer, given how utterly captured the FAs or the FA and all this soccer associations are in terms of how propagandistic they've become. This all comes with money and this obligation to be ambassadors and spokespeople, and so we get all the virtue signaling you'd expect to see from people who were involved. Gary Lineker, of course, would be a very obvious example. The reason the subject came up is because Dangerfield is a big Arsenal fan. He's a proper good gooner, and he, even though he's living in Phnom Penh, he still tries to see all of Arsenal's fixtures, and a few people in the chat that particular night were giving him a bit of a hard time about it, saying off to your Sportsball again, Chris, and he was saying what a silly thing to say, you're insulting me for liking stuff, and I do agree with him, by the way. I do agree with him. We should be able to just enjoy things. We certainly should be just able to enjoy things, and I certainly am a bit of a Sportsball indulger myself, and although a little bit less so, it has to be said. Some of the proselytizing and did the way Sky adopted the whole Black Lives Matter thing and all that stuff. That's kind of tore it a little bit for me. I still have a bit of an interest. I can follow along a little bit, but it did kind of ruin it to a certain degree. But not a reason to not support stuff and like stuff, I agree with Dangerfield's basic point there. Even with all the silly virtue signalling, even with all the silly, irritating, patronising, progressive propagandising, there's still stuff there to enjoy. You can still be a bit invested, But this got me to thinking about the larger problem, though, with Sportsball, though. And I was scrolling Twitter there, having become aware of off the balls, and particularly the hack journalist Shane Hannon's sanctimonious little weaselly routine that he pulled on Kellie Harrington for what she assumed was just going to be a basic chat about her boxing prospects and going forward, but instead he chose to say, well, you were on Twitter 6 months ago and you liked a GB News tweet that was reporting about the murder of Lola Davy, a 12-year-old girl who was murdered and possibly sexually assaulted and dismembered in a Paris suburb by recently arrived migrants from North Africa, I believe. And this was like, oh, you're an ambassador for SPAR, so would you care to talk about your thoughts on immigrants, given that you have this position in society? Now, she didn't want to talk about it, and she kind of stonewalled them, and and quite rightly so. I mean, really and truly, the appropriate response would have been, oh, you're one of those, okay, well, conversation over, there's nothing to talk about. But now he's shilling that clip on his on social media and off the ball and saying, oh, the tough questions were asked. She was asked, she had a chance to respond, So anyway, the journos are dogpiling on her, and but the huge amount of support, of course, is all saying, no, Kellie has nothing to apologise for, and she certainly doesn't, by the way. They're trying to call her an anti-trans person as well, because she doesn't agree that men should compete in women's sports, and she's quite right there as well, of course. The reason I'm mentioning this at all, though, is the limitations of Sportsball. I mean, I had a scroll through your man Shane Hannon's Twitter, and, you know, this self-professed sports geek, you know, but that's just it. This is his thing. Like, he'll talk about GAA minutiae, like, you know, it's this sort of high altar of oh God, it's just the most wonderfully life-affirming thing, and, you know, the bants and this, that and the other. Now, in and of themselves, there's no problem with any of that stuff, but this clearly is how developed his worldview is. I am my sports geekdom. Yet this lad purports to be a journalist saying, oh no, I'm getting in asking the hard questions about larger issues. Do you know what I mean? It's utterly ridiculous, and that isn't even the worst of it. I mean, he's a paid hack, right? What else is he going to do? But it's the replies on off the ball, all blokes, I might add, all lads claiming in their bios to be just a regular bloke, you know, like me golf, like me football, you know, with their little Shamrock Rovers, like little, you know, avatar, whatever, like, you know, oh no, the tough questions were asked, and if she's been exposed as a bigot, like, none of them, you can just tell, none of them have a clue what they're talking about. This is the point. They just obviously haven't got a clue what they're talking about. There is no thought, and that is the poisoned and mortal wound at the heart of Sportsball, unfortunately, is that it has transposed itself, or it takes the place of having an informed view. You get invested in that, and that's where the kind of right-wing reactionary insult came from, is that young men particularly, they're invested, they're over-invested, they're hyper-invested in Sportsball to the exclusion of having any good, coherent, engaged worldview. And I think it is legitimate criticism. It's not to say that people should be dismissed with the Sportsball insult, but when people reveal themselves that they have no good, coherent, well thought out position on a thing, but are happy to go stamping in with their, you know, well done off the ball, asking the tough questions, you know, and even more pathetic, just being arseholes on a social media platform to annoy people, which is probably a lot of it as well, thinking, oh look, I got a reaction. And that really is a big problem here. This is a massive problem, because it shows an absolute dearth of thought goes into so many people's interior thought life about the world around them. You know, just as long as you have your Sportsball, like, you're just a regular guy, then, like, it's not good enough. It just isn't good enough. And I mean, I've no axe to grind here at all. Kellie Harrington, who seems like a lovely person and an outside of the earth inner city dub, you know, but she'd probably find my politics quite unpalatable, I would think, you know what I mean? I mean, I on this issue, though, I'm behind her four square, and I think people should raise their voices up and say, no, off the ball, you silly, overreaching little program. Try and just produce entertaining sports content. And if you can't form a kind of a coherent worldview around the wider world and wider subjects, just don't bother. Or if you do, don't be hacky about it, and don't be lowest common denominator about it, and don't make it so blindingly obvious that you're just trying to generate interest in your piss weak content, you know. So anyway, that's my position on Sportsball anyway. So if anyone has any thoughts, let me know. Thanks for listening.